to the State Allocation Board Pre-SAB meeting. Today we have representatives from OPSC, the California Department of Education, and the Division of the State Architect to provide some updates, and we'll also be going over the board items for this month's meeting. And today we're going to change the order a little bit. We will be starting with DSA, and Ms. Masha Lutzik is here to present for them. That one. All right. Slideshow. Oops. You'll have to. There we go. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, so bear with us on the PowerPoint slides today.
All right. Good morning. I don't think I can see people. There you go. Much better. Good morning. So our presentation today is not going to be too long, unless you all want to ask me about the media coverage. And we have some new publications that DSA has that I want to brief you on. We have revisions to our Bulletin 1102, which covers the process for the reviews for High Performance Incentive Grant. And some of the recent updates that we did were intended to provide options for those school construction projects that have started DSA plan verification process or even finished it before the new High Performance Incentive Grant regulations went into effect on January 25th. So there are some options provided there. The main goal of our process is to make sure that the integrity of the DSA plan verification for structural safety, fire life safety, and accessibility are not compromised by school districts wanting to amend the designs to match the new High Performance Incentive Grant criteria. So we have some options there of how districts could proceed and retain the initial DSA review approval and also take advantage of the new funding that's provided by the State Allocation Board. Another publication that we have posted is a set of frequently asked questions and answers on fire life safety. It's a revival of an old document that we had on the website in the past, and it's meant to provide guidance for school districts and local fire authorities in answering questions about jurisdiction. Who has authority over fire life safety provisions at a school site before, during, after construction, and information for local fire officials of how the school construction process, plan design and oversight is conducted through DSA. We plan on this to be a live document, to be updated as we go, and the more questions that we get and answers that we develop in concert with the State Fire Marshal, we'll be putting on this document. And we did post another set of information on Assembly Bill 300, which dates back to 1999. And that's in response to many, many questions we've been getting from the school districts about the status of their school sites. And what we have posted is our updated survey results, which is original AB 300 information updated with feedback from the school districts on individual school sites. We plan to post the updated spreadsheet monthly, and for any school districts that want to provide updates to their building survey, I have a phone number of wonderful staff member that we have that can help with that process. And I want to draw everyone's attention to this. It's a quick link on our webpage because it's meant to provide factual information on what AB 300 was, what DSA did in response to the bill, what DSA has done since then as far as updating the survey, and what is represented by the school sites that are listed on that inventory. And really, in brief, it's meant to provide that's the information that DSA had from original plan drawings, and the buildings that are identified on the list are meant that they are built before 1976, which was a time for significant code changes for seismic safety, and have facilities, from what we know, of certain building types. So that information is available, and we believe it will help answer many of the school district's questions and concerns. And that's all I have for informational updates. I have our usual updates on bin times, which represents projects that are awaiting plan review. So this is our, in essence, waiting list. Our structural bin time, and the average is reported by taking the three greatest numbers and average them out. So you, like in category 1, the highest bin time is 6.0. So you average that out with the two other highest values in the other categories. And then our statewide average that we report is 5.3 weeks. Should have been. Fire life safety is a much higher bin time, and a lot of the time, as was mentioned here a few months back, projects that are alteration and modernization projects, in fact, trigger greater review for fire life safety and accessibility than they do structural, as there's little structural work that oftentimes being done. And again, for our access bin times, our bin times are rather high in these areas, and that's due to many factors such as workload and staffing. And we continue to report our scorecard on aggregate for various projects, and as typical, the breakdown between the plan review time between DSA and client is a little, it's almost half and half on some areas, and in others, a greater percentage of time is attributed to client days of making corrections to respond to DSA comments. And again, this is our scorecard for projects valued under $1 million, between $1 million and $5 million, and $5 million and larger. These projects represent about 10% of our total workload, but they do take the longest. As you can see here, the average total processing days on average is over 200 days. So these are the large construction projects that do take the longest. And this is the extent of our presentation, and unless there are any questions, I'll pass the baton to OPSC.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rick Asbell. I'm a Fiscal Operations Manager over at OPSC. I'm going to change this slide really quick. Okay, so what I wanted to show you here on this slide is we've had a number of bond sales that have occurred over the last few months, and this is just a report as to what's occurring with each one of those bond sales and how much funding is available for each one of those bond sales. Without going line by line on this, I do want to draw your attention to the November 2010 bond sale. The biggest drawdown in terms of these bond sales from March to April was for the November 2010 bond sale. We went from 570 down to 234 million. If you look at the total funds available as it relates to all these bond sales, we've had a drawdown of approximately 378 million. So that's from the 1003.2 down to the 624.5 in terms of the total funds available. Okay, and then the next slide is the status of the bond authority as it relates to new construction. In looking at the pie chart, the blue part is the apportioned part, and the amount that we've had apportioned since the beginning of this with all these propositions has been $13.6 billion. In terms of the unfunded part, which is in the red, we're looking at $542.9 million. And then the remaining bond authority, which is in the yellow, is $507.6 million. Are there any questions? Okay. I'll turn it over to Barbara Kampminer.
Okay, now for some of the action items that we have as part of today's agenda. It's a relatively short agenda this evening, but the first action item relates to the Charter School Facilities Program, and this is our closeout item. And this is the follow-up to an item that went before the board in 2010 and 2009, In 2009, there was additional bond authority that returned to the Charter School Facilities Program, and the board declared an additional filing round so that more preliminary apportionments could be awarded. That was done in 2010, and when the preliminary apportionments were made in 2010, the board left an 8-month window so that if additional bond authority became available, applicants would not need to reapply. Because we had 14 projects that at that time we did not have enough bond authority to provide a preliminary apportionment. So within that 8 months, we did have a return of approximately $41.2 million, and that was added to the $800,000 that was remaining from the original round of apportionments. So there was $42 million that the board could use to continue funding down the list that was approved in 2010. And the item today is seeking to close out that round because we have passed that 8-month mark. And also we are able to provide preliminary apportionments to additional charter schools. One charter school is being presented for a preliminary apportionment as part of this agenda, and then some of the staff recommendations seek to bring back 2 to 3 additional preliminary apportionments in the next couple of months. With the charter school apportionments, it's a multi-step process, so there is a financial soundness review that needs to be done, and that can take a little bit of time to go through. So we are working with the California School Finance Authority to meet the rest of the program criteria, and then we will be presenting preliminary apportionments for the remaining charter schools as consent items in future agendas. Now, what this also means is that for those that do not receive a preliminary apportionment at this time that were on the list that went in May of 2010, OPSC will be returning those applications because the round has officially been closed out once the board takes action tonight. And any additional funds that become available, additional bond authority, we would be seeking board direction in the future for establishing new filing rounds once sufficient bond authority became available. So it's a closeout item with the benefit of being able to make some additional preliminary apportionments, which is an exciting thing for those charter schools that have been waiting. So kind of a good news item. Are there any questions on this item? Okay. The next action item is the continuation of the discussion on the State Allocation Board Subcommittee on Rules and Procedures. And this item went to the board last month. The subcommittee had met to discuss the appeals process, and they had presented recommendations for full board consideration. Now, part of the recommendations that the subcommittee presented included that when a district reaches disagreement with the Office of Public School Construction, the school district files an appeal request form, which is Form SAB 189, and that begins the formal appeal process. And the subcommittee recommended that the appeal process take 90 to 120 days, and that within the first 5 working days of receiving the appeal, OPSC will send an acknowledgement to the district that also includes the proposed date that the item would be heard by the board. And that proposed date you can find on the appeals log, which is in the back of the agenda. So that was a recommendation unless the appeal included health and safety factors, and then the timeline was recommended at 60 to 90 days. The subcommittee also requested that OPSC develop a timeline within that 90 to 120-day framework to explain what steps would happen at what point. So OPSC has provided a draft timeline for board consideration, and the timeline that you'll see as part of tonight's agenda is the same one that went before the board last month. But basically, once we receive the 189 from the district, within 5 business days, we will send a letter to the school district acknowledging receipt and informing the district of the date that the item will be placed on the SAB workload. Within 40 calendar days of receiving the appeal, OPSC staff, the executive officer, the assistant executive officer, and other relevant personnel will meet with the school district. The goal of this meeting is to gain a deeper understanding of the appeal, maybe learn any new information that might be available, but to basically make sure that we're all working towards the same question and answer on the appeal. Within 60 days of the appeal receipt date, OPSC staff will provide an initial recommendation to our executive officer and the assistant executive officer. And then within 65 days, which is 5 days after receiving the initial staff recommendation, the assistant executive officer and the executive officer are going to edit and finalize the recommendation. And then within 70 days, the OPSC staff is going to mail a letter to the district, which we actually do through email, so there's no lost time there, but we'll mail our position to the district so that there are no surprises. So this letter is going to include what OPSC's findings are, what our recommendation will be to the board, all the pertinent details, and this will be substantially similar to what is included on the actual board item. There's no intent for there to be any changes between the date of this letter and what actually makes it into the board item other than formatting changes so that it fits into the board item format, but there will not be any new information included in the board item after that point. Within 80 days, the district needs to inform OPSC staff in writing if they agree with the recommendation or wish to move forward and have the item heard at the board. And then the appeal will be scheduled to be heard at the next regular board meeting, which will accomplish the goal of having the appeal heard within the 120 days. So that timeline is being presented. Now, there was a question that came up last month, which is why this item is back again, and it relates to the issue of postponement. The rules that have previously been established by the State Allocation Board talk about how many times an item can be on the agenda and reasons that you can pull the item from the agenda or request that it be removed. But it didn't set any timelines on when you have to do the postponement. And last month at the board, there was an issue because the chair and the vice chair, per the subcommittee recommendation, had 5 days to respond to a request to postpone within 5 working days of the hearing. Now, some of the board members were concerned that that 5 days would limit the ability of school districts or OPSC to postpone an item after the point at which that board item had been published, which is typically about 5 days before the hearing. So there are some options for the board to consider on when they would like to have the timelines be for postponement. And option 1 would have a timeline on postponement, and that would be that the school district or OPSC may submit a request to postpone at any time up to 2 working days after the board item is published. Typically, we publish on a Wednesday, so that would be the close of business on Friday. That 2 working days would still allow the chair and the vice chair a couple days to review the request and respond in writing in advance of the board meeting so that the school district would know if it was necessary to attend, and they'd have their answer before the board meeting. Now, the second option would be that there's no time limit on when you can request a postponement. And in effect, what that does is it allows folks, OPSC or the district, to request a postponement right up to the day of the board meeting. And staff will be putting those options out there for board consideration today and seeking a recommendation. So with this item, tonight we are seeking the direction from the full board regarding the committee's initial recommendations for the entire appeals procedure. We are also seeking direction to clarify whether or not there will be a timeline and what the time limit will be on any postponements. And then we are asking the board to adopt the OPSC proposed appeals processing timeline. And if you want to take a look at that timeline in a more visual format, the attachment shows it in a different format, so you can potentially post this up on your wall when you have an appeal so that you can be aware of what's happening within the certain timeline. So that is the attachment. We've clarified that the 5 days to send the letter is 5 business days, which was a request at the last meeting, and all other days specified are calendar days. Any questions on that one? Okay. That's it for the action items, but we did want to highlight one of the reports that will be going to the board tonight, and that is the update report on the Seismic Mitigation Program Subcommittee. The Seismic Subcommittee met 2 times in the month of April. The first meeting was held on April 12th, and the second meeting was held just yesterday. And at the April 12th meeting, the committee discussed some previously identified barriers to accessing seismic mitigation program funding. They discussed the status of the program and received a summary of current projects. And they began considering options for promoting participation in the program, including modifying the eligibility requirements and potentially reevaluating the list of eligible buildings. And they also discussed the option of transferring the seismic mitigation program under the facility hardship program with a more liberal set of criteria. Now, that discussion continued yesterday, and tonight we will have subcommittee members speaking to the update from yesterday's meeting. The chair, Mr. Scott Harvey, will be presenting this item tonight. Any questions on that one? All right. Brief implementation committee update. I apologize, Tracy wasn't able to be here this morning, so I will provide that update for you as well. The next implementation committee meeting is scheduled for May 12th from 9:30 to 3:30. The location will be the state capitol, but the room is yet to be determined. And at this point, we don't have a proposed agenda, so you can look for that in the coming weeks. And there was not a meeting in April, so there are no updates to report from the April meeting. With that, are there any questions for OPSC? Okay, so we're going to go to the California Department of Education presentation. Fred Yeager's here to provide that presentation. Oops. All right, there you go, Fred.
Good morning. I think we can be out of here quickly. A couple topics I'm going to talk about today. We'll go into more detail on those. Schools of the Future initiative. Many of you have heard the Superintendent Torlakson has a Schools of the Future initiative. Some advisory panels that are providing him some recommendations and advice on some areas. They met for the first time on March 4th, and they met again on April 18th. Here's the two main committees with 4 subcommittees. We have a High Performance Schools Subcommittee, which has financing, renewable energy, high efficiency schools, and grid neutral schools groups. And then the School Facility Program Reform Subcommittee, and you can see the subgroups there. Okay. Their next steps are to meet on June 1st, and at that time they'll present Superintendent Torlakson with their report and recommendations. All right. CDE recruitment. We have, in the next week or so, be posting on our webpage our examination form application. And what an exam is in the state process is when the state has a hiring, they hire off lists, and those lists are created during the exam process. So this is the exam process, not the hiring process. So those interested in applying for future jobs available for our consultant level positions want to check this out. So it'll be on our What's New page. You can see the minimum qualifications there, the teaching credential or a master's in a business administration, public administration related field, and 3 years related professional experience. There's more detail on the application for the exam. So take a look at those in the next week or so. That will be on our webpage. All right. Contact Jeff Thorne for the eligibility and application information, and me if you want to know what the job does and the like. All right. Drinking water. SB 14 by Senator Leno, as of July 1st of this year, that you must provide free fresh drinking water to students during mealtime. Okay. And we also have some guidance on our webpage and some contacts at our Nutrition Services Division. Robin and Mike can answer some specific questions as to how the law is being implemented. So check that out. That's effective July 1st. Another opportunity is middle school CTE grants. There's $1.8 million in one-time funds available for grants into the 100 to 150,000. So probably not a lot of money for facilities, but these are for operational and programming activities. So in general, these are to provide CTE at middle schools and to develop or enhance the transition into high school and beyond. And then there's more details at these links. Okay. And the funding applications are due in, it looks like, 2 weeks. Last item is the United States Environmental Protection Agency has updated its Tools for Schools kit to talk about radon and some other indoor air quality. Now, indoor air quality, as most of you know, has a tremendous impact on student achievement because asthma and other respiratory ailments keep a lot of kids and teachers out of school. So if they're in school more, it follows that there is higher achievement. So this is one of the things you can look at to find out of ways to ensure higher indoor air quality in your projects. And I think that's it. So any questions on that or anything in general for? Okay, great.
And that concludes our presentations today, unless anybody has any additional questions. We'd like to thank you all very much for coming or for watching online, and we will be doing this again next month, 9:30, Day of the Board. Thank you.